Next, here's what we've got to know, okay? By next up for your poetry project, you have selected a poem. You turned this in by, I extended the deadline to 11:59 last night. So your poem exploration, you find a poem with the graphic organizer with 5 choices. You have that mini summary and the hyperlinked. Your poetry options are all there. Then you highlighted the one that you like the most, okay? And turn that in on Canvas. That was due yesterday. Overdue today. Get her done. With that in mind, I have already scored those and given you feedback on those. So if you open up your Canvas, we don't need Chromebooks today, but if you open up your Canvas and you see returned feedback or recent feedback saying, what the heck is this? I get a 0 out of 10, but I swear I turned that in. You may just not have given me a link that I could access. A number of you did that wonky, so I can't see it. All right, so just resubmit it. A number of you, I don't know how this happened. You highlighted your entire page. What? Okay, fix it. There's like no credit until you fix it, so fix it. Stuff like that, and then resubmit so I know it pops up and changes your score from what I gave you, and it color codes it for me so I know to go back to that. If you don't resubmit your work, even though it says it's late, I know it's not, it's no big deal. That if you don't resubmit your work, then it doesn't show me to go back and regrade it, so I don't. Didn't know that happens. All right. For those of you that turned those in, you also got feedback that if your poem was fewer than 20 lines, to maybe pick a secondary poem from your list to help. And I didn't make a huge point of this, so this was my bad. But hopefully you picked up on the fact that like the poem in the model that we read last week was pretty long enough to break into different chunks to give it that prose poetry effect. If your poem is 4 lines, sorry. If your poem is 4 lines, it's not going to have that poetic effect we're after. So I gave you a comment saying like, you can certainly keep that first short poem, but augment it or add a second short poem, and we'll just work it both into your introduction, and you'll be able to piece them together as you go in the project. Okay? Any questions about that? Like I said, about 20 lines adds to the effect of the overall project so that it will feel like you're meshing 2 styles of literature together. Anything less than that, it kind of aches for it. Okay? So, in this packet that you see today, what you will recognize is the annotation guide, or what yesterday on the test I called your checklist for things to think about as you are going through and preparing to write your poetry interpretation paragraph. On the second page, and this is what you are going to work with, we're going to model what you are going to do on your third page with the poem you've selected for yourself. Okay? English 9 kids, that's going to be your prose poetry poem. English 9 honors kids, that's going to be your recitation poem that you're selecting for Poetry Out Loud for next week. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that at the end of class. But as I annotate the poem up here, and as we talk through this, you're going to take some notes because this is going to count when you turn this whole packet in on Thursday. Okay? So there's that. Okay?
Puntos.
So, first stop, and using this list to your advantage, yesterday before the test, I maybe they were reminders, but I brought to your attention a couple of things. I maybe defined a couple of things for you. Who remembers what that was? Who remembers what I said at the beginning? Things you need to know about this poem to be able to accurately analyze. One was like a vocabulary word, and one was like a place. Yeah, not even.
You gave the definition for the word.
For the word deferred, exactly right. So to defer something, who remembers what I said? Yeah, Maureen? To put off. Or save for later. So I use the example of if I was to defer my admission to the University of Iowa because like I got in and everything and I was gonna go, but then O'Neill called me and my ship has come in that I get sponsored to go on the professional surfers circuit.
Amazing.
I mean, Aaron may not look like I can hang, but I definitely can. I'm very tan under all of my clothes. So when I then get in touch with the university, I say, thank you very much for admitting me. I'm going to defer. I'm going to put off, save for later, actually attending college because I got to see the surfer thing out. I got to do it. I got to ride that wave, if you will. No pun intended. Good. So, please, as they say, I have to say this in the sixth period too. At my kids' daycare, what they tell them to say to one another when they're touching each other unnecessarily is, "Stop touching my body." It's not so funny. So like now, when my kid gets home and like starts hitting or scratching, we're like, "Stop touching my body! Don't touch my body!" Cracks me up.
You just touched like the back of my hair like 12 times.
That sounds really weird.
Don't touch my
Don't touch my mom's body.
Can you tell me what the back of your hair is?
It's just the most straightforward way. Front hair, back hair. The most straightforward way of explaining. Stop touching each other. So, the second thing that I explained was this. What do you remember about that? Yeah, Eric.
Harlem Renaissance was a spontaneous thing that showed up in African American art, music.
Not necessarily so spontaneous, but it was definitely a phenomenal step in a direction of including who? Including who in the greater cultural.
Langston Hughes, Louis Armstrong.
Uh-huh.
I did this in the American studies.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So this African American insurgence of culture being finally accepted by white society, and this was all happening in the hotbed of New York City, particularly in a very small neighborhood in the north of Manhattan called Harlem. So a predominantly African American okay. And this, your page, should be open to here, and you should be taking these notes. This is worth credit for you. Okay?
90.
Come on.
Yeah.
No.
5.
Okay? So, those two things were very important to know. And when you look at your list for how to read a poem, the first stop is to define anything that you do not know. You already know, when you look at number 1, how to annotate the poem, that the title becomes really important. So when you think about now, knowing what we know about Harlem, it says at some point, make a connection between the title and the meaning. So I should stop. I know that you've read this a couple of times, but again, just so it's fresh in all of our memory, Harlem, or Dream Deferred by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? So thinking through, I know you've read it a couple of times and hearing it again out loud, what does Harlem as the title have to do with the rest of it? Have to do with deferring your dreams? What's the link? What's the connection here? And I'm going to say this because I absolutely mean it. Ask these questions. What we're going to discuss today, there is no one right answer. There are no two right answers. There may be 16 right answers to the kinds of questions I'm going to ask you today, because here's the thing. We're moving into that stage of the year where it becomes really important. Yes, there are wrong answers. You could say popsicles and tigers, and that's wrong. Okay?
Awesome.
It's awesome, but wrong. Awesomely wrong, perhaps. But what I don't think with these interpretation questions, because really they're based on your experience, your reading of it, your point of view, your perspective. And therefore, what I say is that your answer is only as right as you can explain it. If you can work it out and explain to somebody else or on paper why using the text and spotlighting the stuff that seems important to you, if you can make your point of view, your idea make sense, then guess what? It's right. Okay, so that's what I want you to focus on. There are no, you can't be just slightly off here, as long as you're explaining yourself well. So, based on your interpretation, and with 16 possible right answers, what was the connection that you made maybe yesterday even in your rehearsal paragraph? How does Harlem connect to this idea of putting off dreams? What does one have to do with the other? Keith?
It's talking about the people who live there.
Okay.
They can't follow their dreams, so that they want to be kind in life.
Okay,
They have to put it off.
they have to put it off. People in Harlem can't live their dreams? Maybe. Why might that be true? What is it about Harlem that might make this true? Keith, you want to follow up?
It's a tough name.
Okay, why?
Because of all the things.
Maybe. Maybe that could be true. See the idea? Maybe. Eric?
I think it's talking about before Harlem Renaissance popped up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before it became popular, the people before that couldn't live their dreams.
Okay.
So ultimately comes back to
Because they were being stifled, so maybe it has, maybe you're making that link with racism too, but particularly before, before the Harlem Renaissance, the life of artists, they weren't accepted enough. Great idea. Thinking very practically, very day to day, Harlem is a neighborhood of low and middle income people. How might that affect this? Easton,
Maybe they don't have enough money
to,
to like get what they need to
Okay.
pay their dream.
okay. So if, yeah, Victoria,
They might have to put off their dream because they have better things, more important things.
more pressing priorities. So this, unlike other neighborhoods in New York City, I picture a teenager maybe, I don't know why, but a teenager growing up in Harlem who has a talent, when he gets to be of the age where like, shoot, I could really make this dream of playing my trumpet or of writing plays, I could really make this happen. I could really make art and painting work for me right now. I've got the talent, I've got people who believe in me, but wait, my grandma is living in our apartment, my sister just had a baby, and my dad, ever since the accident, well, he can't work. I mean, all of these, when you are talking about this particular neighborhood at this particular time, you have these real world concerns that make potentially a frivolous and lengthy quest to be known as an artist. It wasn't happening until, like Eric said, at the Harlem Renaissance, where like people were getting paid for any of this stuff. So you had to put it away and go to the factory. You had to put it away and take care of business. Okay, this is great. Now, next step, pay attention to the beginnings, endings, and breaks. They will point you toward meaning. So beginning, ending, and then break here, and break here. And sometimes, depending on who's published the poem, there's a break between load and, or does it explode here? So what's the first thing you kind of can't help but notice, like the most easy thing to notice about the first sentence of this poem? I heard it, but not very loudly. Beginnings and endings. What do we notice? Morgan? It's a question. And interestingly enough, Gabe is absolutely right. At the end,
Oh, wow.
where you would expect there to be like a final answer, like a so what, sum it up. Hughes. There's yet another question. So can we make this inference that the question that starts the poem never gets answered? If we're still asking questions all the way through? Answer the question that we'll get back to the break idea in just a second. But the next stop is again and again. Here's the patterns of ideas and words, circle and connect words that explore similar topics or that convey similar feelings. Yeah, but for again and again, what I notice here is that since we brought up the idea of questions, look at how many I have. Again and again and again. So a pattern of questions, I can infer that if this poem is only based on questions that are kind of phrased like, okay, what happens to the dream? And then there's a space. So he asks the question. I maybe even would interpret this break here as what teachers in the biz call thinking time. Give your students an opportunity to ponder. And then, does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over? Because of this litany of questions, and they're all so different, like the questions are showing so many different options. Why would there be so many different ways to answer this question? What happens to a dream deferred? Ava?
Maybe so you can answer for yourself and you can take it for a person.
Okay. Perhaps to answer for yourself. And if you could answer for yourself, thinking back to the title and kind of what we've been talking about so far, who else could Langston Hughes potentially be answering for? Keith? Yeah? Really, we are, like, there are no wrong answers today. Nobody said popsicles once. The people that live in Harlem.
I should have said it out loud.
There you go. So others in Harlem. I mean, like, I could see that being true. Where maybe he's seen the guy who runs the corner store, his dried up like a raisin in the sun. And somebody else's is festered like a sore. And somebody else's is run away. And somebody else's is stunk like rotten meat. Well, let's unpack that for just a second. Because what we have here, go orange. What we have here are literary devices. It's working our way down. I spy a simile.
Oh, God.
And some of you miss this, guys. Like. Comparisons that use like or as, we call those similes. So, when we look at, don't just identify the device, talk about why the device is important. What feeling does it create? We're gonna come back to that one. That one's hard. Literally, what feeling do you have when something festers, it becomes infected? So if, like, you've got an open wound that becomes infected, what is the literal feeling that you have? Pain. Could you see that? That your reaction to putting off your dream to go work in the factory or to go work at the shipping yard to do like labor intensive stuff, when all you really want to do is play the trumpet, that could cause you like physical pain to think about? That hurts. This idea of run, I don't think your sore is running, but like, do you just, I mean, everybody knows somebody like this, that like when something bad happens, they just avoid it. They put it away, like, nope, not today. I'm not even going to think about it. So maybe avoidance could be another reaction that he's seen people of Harlem react. This one's a little bit trickier. Does it stink like rotten meat? Like maybe it's not rotten meat, but like if you bring your stuff, if you bring your lunch to school and like you forgot it over the weekend and So literally, the reaction that you would have would be the rotten meat. Probably what? Yeah, disgust, like sickness. I like disgust. That's so disgusting that it creates that like, makes me sick to my stomach to think about anything that I could have had that I just didn't have maybe the guts to follow up on. Okay? Going back to this one, does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? The sun has done what to the raisin? Has like dried it up, shriveled it up, raisined it up. The sun has raisined it up. Raisined it up.
Wow.
The sun, so like what has, sun versus grape, who's won?
Definitely
The sun.
grape.
No, the grape has lost, it's a shrivelly raisin, who eats raisins? Toddlers.
So hand down.
love raisins.
Ladies and gentlemen, the sun versus any of us, we all lose, let's be honest.
What about a blue sun?
Now, this last one,
We attack at night.
this last one, well, but the sun is shining somewhere. Isn't that nice? So, this last one is different. This last one is different. We're crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet. Now, why sweet? This shows me like all this stuff sucks, but then a syrupy sweet, like it can't be all bad. And this sort of, and again, I have no right answers. I had a kid in the 6th period was like, well, it once maybe was appealing to think about your dream, and now it's not. I could totally see that. The way I read this is a little bit different because I think of the imagery here, that I can see that piece of candy in my mind, and I'll tell you exactly what it is. My Grandma Dorothy, my dad's mom, she used to have, I don't know, I think they're Mexican candies. I'm not exactly sure, but I love them. Those strawberry candies where the wrapper looks like a strawberry.
Yeah.
And then the old lady candy.
Yeah.
So like, it's not like a popular candy. I don't even know where I'd find them to buy them. Okay. So I'm right. Okay, that's good to know. So I get this very like clear picture of being like 6 or 7 years old and getting into her maroon Cutlass Supreme and finding one like somewhere in the seats and be like, and then you open it up and the wrapper kind of sticks to it and you like look at it and it's kind of like oozy but also kind of crystallized and it just looks like crusty.
I'm still.
I'm still gonna eat it, let's be honest. So this image, then thinking about how out of all this sucky stuff, now there's something that's not quite a perfect sweet, but it's crusty and it's sugared over, a little bit gritty, but it's still sweet. This reminds me of my other grandma, and this is again, there are no right answers. It's only as right as I can explain it. And so my other grandma, when she talked about the dream that she deferred, because she was, when she met my grandpa, she was a dancer. And her dream was to become one of those like rockhead kicking dancers at Radio City Music Hall in New York City. And she was making money and like on tour when she met my grandpa, but then they got married real quick and he went off to World War II and she had to settle down because she was having a baby. So, but when she talked about like her dancing career, she never got like twisted up. She never got like salty about it. She had this very nostalgic feeling for it. It would bring a smile to her face. So that could be why it's sweet, isn't it? So now, you see a break, and then you see for the first time, after a series of suggestions, the end with question marks, here's the only sentence, the only declarative statement. Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. It's like the weight of that dream. You just carry it with you. Maybe you are never free of it. But then, and I'm going to be completely honest with you guys, I get it until here. What does this mean? I could read it in a bunch of different ways. Or does it explode? What would be one rationale you could use, one reason why it explodes at the end? Joe, idea?
Positive take on it, by the other ones that are not lagging, maybe one of them like they can get this.
Okay, so the dream that you set aside eventually explodes. Explain how that can be a good thing. A dream
Then like,
blows up.
like you just like think of setting it aside so it explodes. And it does, you know.
Okay, so like you give yourself a second chance. Okay? That could be an idea. Easton.
So mine kind of like goes with Joe's. It's like if something's holding you back and you decide to just ditch whatever's holding you back and go for it.
That's really empowering. Lance, did you have one?
Yeah. It could mean it just disappears.
That it could just like,
Just, yeah.
yeah, like that suddenly poof, it's like it frees you.
Dave has a question. No, I don't have a question. I got it.
Oh, Dave.
Dave has a-
Oh, you're
Yeah.
So what if it's like,
No.
like a dream of the music? and the piece, like, you already know that? What if it's like a culture? Like all that stuff? Like,
I hope she doesn't have work.
Dang! Ooh, that's a good idea.
See?
So say that one more time. So that you've got, so it's like you put too many fireworks in one shed.
Yeah.
So it's like all this potential. So you got all this potential and it's so closely packed that it kind of blows up like a
I need this.
First of all, I never walked that way. Okay, whatever. Should you be words with racial, obvious, calling me names, you can swear words? Nadia. Nadia.
You guys, I like this a lot. Keith, last thing.
Boy!
This is very odd.
Bye, everybody. I will see you tomorrow. Nicely done today. Hopefully you got all these notes.
Excuse me. Miss Basil,
Yeah.
teacher,
Oh my God.
why did I get an F? Why did I get Fs?